Hi everybody, and welcome to the joint presentation on autism and classical myth with a particular Herculean focus. So it's a joint thing. It's me, Susan Deacy from Roehampton. Here I am in my office, and also Lisa. Do you want to say hello, Lisa?
Hi, Lisa Morris from Barilan in Israel, and I'm in my office with the air conditioning on, so it's a much better arrangement. We do have sun outside as well.
Yeah. Here I am in southwest London, where it's always sunny. Okay, so it's such an honour to take part in this event. I was just so delighted to get the invitation from April. Hi, April. Not least because there have already been connections between a project Lisa and I are very much part of. We'll probably say more about that in due course. The Our Mythical Childhood Project, under whose wing we're doing some autism work, and the Children's History Society. And also April has been long been very, very supportive of the work I'm doing on autism and children's culture. And also another thing to say is that this event is, this paper that we're given is very timely. And in order to demonstrate how timely that is, I'm just going to switch to PowerPoint. So I just need to share screen. Here we go. One reason it's so timely is that, a little while ago, Lisa and I, along with our colleague ILS, who is Lisa's colleague at Barilan, launched a network for anybody who's interested in anything to do with autism and classical myth and the possible connections between the two. It's called ACCLAIM. I just went to confidently change to the next slide and nothing happened. Okay. As we're giving this joint presentation here, our first online event, our first ever event, is actually about to take place Monday of next week, the 24th of May. So by the time you're actually watching this, it'll have taken place, and we can give you some feedback on it if you want to. We launched the network just over a year or so ago in Warsaw at one of the events for the Our Mythical Childhood Project, which is a huge global project, ERC funded, headquartered in Warsaw, with various people from around the world involved. I'm leading things here in the UK, and Lisa's leading things in Israel. And you can see here sort of various little icons that show, amongst other things, our two universities next to one another. And here's the logo of the Our Mythical Childhood Project. And and this is where myself and Lisa, very involved in what we're doing at this point, were announcing the creation of ACCLAIM actually in Warsaw at one of the Our Mythical Childhood events. And so what I'm just going to do briefly now is say some things about how I came to be interested in autism and classical myth. There are so many things I could say here, so I'm just going to keep it as focused as possible. I'll then say some things about how I've taken a Herculean focus and some of the key things behind what I'm doing. And then we can lead into what Lisa and her colleague ILS are developing over in Israel. Okay, so it all started for me a few years ago now. In 2008, I was in a meeting with a teacher, a special needs teacher in a secondary school in the UK. And when she found out that I'm a classicist who's especially interested in myth, she shared with me something that has struck her and that has struck her colleagues as well over the years, namely that autistic children often really enjoy finding out about classical myth. So I started to wonder why that might be the case. And then I started to think whether there might be anything that I could do as a classicist who's passionate about myth and passionate about taking myth beyond the academy. I started wondering if there's anything I could do here. And so I reached out to as many people as I could think of, including in psychology, in drama therapy, in education at my university, Roehampton, and beyond, in order to see if people thought I had some kind of viable topic here. And I kept getting really good feedback. And so what I started doing back in early 2009, and I can include the link at the end for this, I started blogging. Very aware that I didn't know if this was going to go anywhere, but I thought if I can at least get my ideas out there and maybe get some feedback from people, and I could see where it all ended up. And I did get really good feedback from people all over the world as well. And I should say that one of the reasons why it's so great to be linking up here with Lisa is to try to get some sense of how in different parts of the world how autism is perceived and how autism education is undertaken differs. Or does it? Okay, and that's very much one of the things that ACCLAIM is seeking to do. Right? Really think about how things are done in specific parts of the world and how we can learn from other people and do things differently or do things in the same way, etc., etc. So I made various connections, and then in about 2015, I linked up with Katarzyna Marciniak, who is a pioneering scholar of children's culture, very much to take a focus on how classics has a place in autistic children's culture. We teamed up with various other people, including Lisa and a colleague in Australia and a colleague in Cameroon, and we put together a bid to the European Research Council, which was successful. And so I went from having this dream of maybe one day doing something for autistic children based on classical myths to having a whole set of deadlines, right, and having to do it. And so the amount of blogging I did started to escalate, and things moved on to a whole new level, very much now under the wing of our mythical childhood and all the support and encouragement that gave. And what I did first was to decide on a particular mythological figure to focus on. And the figure I decided to focus on for all sorts of reasons, including the fact that he's someone that's intrigued me for as long as I've been interested in mythology. It's the figure of Heracles or Hercules. Okay, and I could talk about this in enormous amounts of detail. I'm happy to answer questions about this if people want. But in very, very, very pared down terms, there's a lot of aspects of Hercules that can resonate with what it is to be autistic, including always having to learn the rules of a situation afresh. Hercules is someone who succeeds brilliantly. He learns how to learn the rules. He learns the rules for how to defeat the Hydra, defeat the Nemean lion, etc., etc., etc. But no sooner has he mastered a particular situation, right, that he moves to a whole new situation and has to learn the rules all over again. And when I shared this and other things about Hercules with autistic people, one response has been, that sounds like being autistic. So I thought, yes, good. So my gut feeling was I think a good one. And what I'm actually doing with the activities I've been developing for a while now, and I'm currently putting together into a book that should be out in the next year or so. What I'm doing is focusing not just on Hercules, but even more specifically than that, on this particular artifact. It's a chimney piece panel, and here's me from about 2015 pointing to the panel with a group of school children who are doing a program at Roehampton at the time. Roehampton is full of neoclassical architecture, Georgian villas, that kind of thing, including one called Grove House that's just like 5 minutes walk away from where I am at the moment in my office at Roehampton. One of these, Grove House, includes a room that's known as the Adam Room, after Robert Adam. Adam did not design the room, it was designed by Wyatt very much after Adam. Okay, so it's very gorgeous neoclassical space, very much a showpiece room at the university. And its chimney piece, as you can see here, includes this very, very detailed 18th century representation by the Carter Workshop, again not Adam, of well, whatever it is, Hercules in the process of choosing or panicking as he's trying to choose between two very different paths in life. One represented by one woman, hard work, something like that. One represented by another woman, pleasure, something like that. And I'm focusing on this particular artifact for all sorts of reasons, including because there's so much here that can resonate with what it is to experience stuff as an autistic person, entering new spaces, for example, trying to deal with too much information right all at once, to quote the National Autistic Society in the UK's campaign from a few years ago. Too much information. But also, if you're autistic and detail orientated, there's so much you can focus on here, and that's something I'm very much trying to harness with the activities. There's also so much potential here, and this I think very much links with what Lisa's working on, emotions, right? But, that's a lot of scope for thinking about the various emotions that Hercules is going through here. Has he gone? Is he trying to? Has he blanked out here? Is he feeling no emotions? That's unlikely. Or is he feeling lots of emotions all at once? Okay, right. So much so that he's gone into feeling shut down. There's also a lot of scope with dealing with choice making. This is the choice of Hercules, thinking about things like how the present can turn into the future. There's also lots of opportunity here for thinking about different points of view. And one thing I was struck by when I was in this room, for example, in this room with these children, for instance, who were all about 15, 16 at the time, none of them had had any formal encounters with anything classical, mythological or otherwise. And what was interesting is that when they looked at the Chimney-Piece panel, unlike me, right, who has been interested in classics for some time, unlike me, they didn't see the man in the middle, right? That wasn't focused for them. What was interesting for them was the women, right? And how the women were trying to, to control their space and maybe vie with one another, perhaps for the man's attention. So there's lots of opportunity for changing points of view and focusing on this woman, for example, or this woman, right? When I did an activity with a group of adults in an autistic cafe a few years ago, very interestingly, I gave people, amongst other things, scissors, and one of them actually cut out Hercules, which is really, really interesting. Okay, and actually very much in line with the 18th century, where on some medals, for example, there's no Hercules, there's just this figure and this figure, right? So I love the idea of not just decentering, but also disappearing Hercules potentially. So there's loads of scope here. Just to say a few things, right? I've had some drawings specially made and an animation as well by Steve Simons, who is, amongst other things, an animator and an artist as well. And so here's his line drawing of the scene as a whole. He's also, and I can perhaps talk about this if people want to, he's also done a closed version. Okay, I'm happy to talk about that with people. He's done an animation of the scene as well. I mean, potentially I could show that if people wanted. And he's also done some details that I'm using in the activities as well. This isn't even everything. Okay, this is just some of them. And I've done various workshops so far over the years on the activities over recent years using Steve's drawings. I also take along all sorts of stuff here, things like helmets, tinsel, right, stickers, right, even a guest book that I wish I could actually bring to you in person. But if you want to write things on my guest book, I'll be very happy to cut it out and paste it in. There's a lot of emphasis on colour, on colouring in, and that's actually quite controversial in special needs education and children's education more broadly. I'm happy to talk about that if people would want. Now, when I first designed a set of activities back in, I think it was 2018, early 2018, as part of to meet one of my deadlines for the ERC project, I designed a set of activities, but they were kind of a bit mad and all over the place because I was trying to do everything all at once. And then since then, Lisa and Eyelet have I think in some ways built on or taken some kind of inspiration from my choice of Hercules, as it were, sorry. And they've designed a set of lessons very much for children in Israel. And I'm going to hand over to Lisa now, because one thing I want to like perhaps I'll end by saying is that, so Lisa sort of built on what I was doing, but took things in a different direction. I in turn have taken inspiration from what Lisa and Ayelet have done in creating the final version of the activities. So I think now that I'm showing some of these like coloured in by various people, it's an ideal time to hand over to Lisa, because I think this is a really good segue.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, and I just have to echo everything Susan said about the support we've had from everybody, the Children's History Society. It's so lovely for April to approach us, and in general, the whole ERC project has been just so exciting to work with people so closely and to be stimulated and take ideas. I had no idea 5 years ago that I was going to be in the slightest bit working on autism or interested in it, and it's absolutely gripped me. As Susan said, some of the things she was beginning to produce really stimulated me. And Ayelet as well, my colleague, the wonderful Ayelet Pierre. I will actually share my screen now and show you some of the things that we have been doing here. And I'm going to start with a photo of Ayelet herself. She's the one in the middle. Let's just make this a full screen. Ayelet is the one in the middle here. She is my colleague at Bar Ilan, Dr. Ayelet Payer, who's wonderful. And next to her on the right here, the gentleman, is Shachar Ben Yehuda. And our first thought when we first decided that this is something we really were excited by and wanted to get involved with was to approach the Israel Autism Society, which at that time Shachar was working for them. He's now doing some other things, but he's still very involved. And he put us together with various schools that he worked with where they have classes made up of special needs children, on the whole autistic children, usually classes of around 8, who are in the school with the regular school, mainstreamed, but do certain things separately and certain things with the rest of the kids of their own age. And he puts us in touch again with Tali Almagor, who you see on the other side of Ayelet, the child putting his fingers up behind. We're going to ignore at this moment because we're not actually meant to show their faces at all. I don't think anybody will recognize him anyway. But Tali is amazing. She's the class teacher of an autistic class, a class of autistic children who are 5th and 6th grades. So we're talking about 10 and 11-year-olds. They are all boys. There are 8 of them. And she is also herself very interested in myth. So sitting down with her, we began to develop a program, and we decided that rather than focusing just on Hercules, as we did at the beginning, although that's a subject in itself, as Susan has shown, that we could really deal with, they thought it would be very beneficial to take some of the major issues that we see in classical mythology that deal with emotions, because dealing with emotions and complex emotions is something that autistic children often find very tricky, to analyze what it is they're feeling and how to deal with it. And we found that there were very parallel things going on in mythology. So I have to say, I did not run this program. Ayelet ran this program. She went into school on a Friday morning for every week for about 10 weeks until COVID intervened. COVID came along towards the end of the program, sort of two-thirds of the way through the program. We did a few sessions on Zoom. And in fact, it was so successful that they asked for a continuation. So we developed a part 2, which also then ran. And there was a couple of other special activities as well. But it started out with this one class and this one teacher. And the idea of the program, I will show you now, was based on Pandora's box. It's a journey, a quest, where the children themselves become heroes. And this is something very much identified with when we talked to them about how it felt to be autistic. The most common thing they came up with was it's special. They didn't feel underprivileged, they didn't feel deprived, they felt special. And they identified with heroes. They saw the world in a different way, not a worse way, as the heroes did. So we had a journey which was based around the idea of Pandora's box, and I'll explain it in 1 second. And it starts with the explanation here, which explains that the collection of emotions, which had, in our version, was in Pandora's box, had been scattered. And their job was to go and find each emotion and deal with it and put it back in the box, basically. So it starts with the box itself, and we have this is a lovely presentation that Ayla herself put together. We have the whole description of the story itself, every time we told a story. And it was very interesting. At the very beginning, one of the pupils said that, oh, I hate mythology. There were some who knew everything, were very excited, and one, I hate mythology. And this was the one who at the end was desperate to continue. So I don't think he'd even admit that he now liked mythology, but he certainly identified with it, and he loved the program and the activities. So what it is you'll see here, we have a journey. Each of these is the places they have to go to collect the different emotions. And it starts out, each time we have a clip. I'm not going to show you this one because it's a clip of Disney, which we should be showing because we'll get told off by Disney. But the idea is that they welcome to the party of the gods, and from there they will go off and do their search. They explain the story of the golden apple and what happens, and then they have their own tasks to do. And here we set down the rules, the administrative rules. And we have here some very clear descriptions and instructions about what to do. First of all, we have a description of what they are going to have to do. And we're told that each time when they finish the level, when they've conquered an emotion and they've collected it, then they will be on their journey again. So the first one we dealt with was jealousy, and that was to do with the golden apple, obviously. We then progress. I'm just going to go very briefly through it. I'm not going to show each thing, but we get to the maze, for example. And each time they have an activity to do, some kind of practical activity or craft activity, and discussion. And from that, they drew out their feelings about the emotion that was underway. Here we have, for example, a maze that they did. And from there, the teacher built a maze in the classroom that they had to find their way through. This was her creating the maze, and we can hear them here solving the maze. They loved doing this. They really enjoyed it. And then there was a discussion about how do you think Theseus felt when he was in the maze, when he was facing the Minotaur, and the whole discussion about fear. We had various pictures and discussions of it, and then they were able to, at the end of this, to say that they had finished this stage and they had conquered fear. And we had various emotions. As you can see, I'm not going to go through the whole thing because it takes too long. We've spent several weeks. We had Midas, and that was with his the golden idea of shame. Midas's ears rather than the gold, and the feeling of shame. We had the next one, get to it, here we go. Narcissus was another story they very much enjoyed. We have the selfie idea here as well, and the emotion here of pride or conceit. And each time we had Achilles, and we talked about shame, for example, and they very much discussed how they felt at each time. For example, when we were discussing shame, here we have loneliness, which was Hercules. Did you feel differently from other people? How do you cope with feeling alone? And when we got on to shame, for example, or embarrassment, where they came up with they were able to verbalize very much how they felt. One of the children, sensitivity we have here with Pegasus, one of the children said that he feels embarrassed when he knows his father gets embarrassed when he lies on the floor and screams if they're in public. They were really able to hone in on these emotions and see not only how they impacted on themselves, but how they impact on other people. They was very, I didn't actually go through the rules, but the rules of the game involve self-respect, respecting everybody else. It's a group activity. Nobody is allowed to go off and do their own thing. Anybody who shows any kind of physical or verbal violence is thrown off the game, and they were desperate not to be thrown off the game. They behaved very well. These are children who don't always find it easy to work together, but the emphasis was on cooperation and cooperative work. And I'll just go ahead to the end of the game because I know we don't have so much time. This was Agamemnon and the idea here of honor. And here we come, we're nearly there. This is the final one. They got everything back in the box. They actually had a party, and they went and released balloons in the sky. Hope was the last thing that was actually there, and this was the end of the journey. And they all got prizes, they got trophies. Each one is written on their own name and the journey that they'd gone through and what they'd accomplished. So we had very, very positive feedback. As I say, I'm going to stop the sharing now. We have very, very positive feedback from the students and from the teacher as well. We continued after that with the Titans journey, going on with more of the same, really. But she did feel that they'd got a great deal out of it. We would like to do this, it's already really to do in other countries, other schools, certainly in Israel, where we're in coordination with several others. Again, unfortunately, COVID kind of put a slight delay on these things, but we are talking to various other teachers. But we'd love to spread it also elsewhere. We can translate everything from Hebrew to English, obviously, but it really is basically ready to go. And we'd be very interested in feedback as well, of how it's been used, how it's been adapted, other ideas, what impact, if any, it's had. Because I think that we have here something that very much appeals anyway to autistic children, as Susan said, but particularly the idea of emotions was something we found very interesting to develop. So thank you to Susan. As I said, it was very much the inspiration, and she's very kindly said that we inspired her in some way. I'm not quite sure, but she's going to go and tell us a little bit more about that now, or at least pretend that we did.
Oh no, it's absolutely not pretense. I absolutely love the work that Lisa and Eyelet have done, and to date, I think you've done more than I have by way of actually going into schools. So what I've done so far is I've been a couple of times into a London primary school, and I think a bit like the school Lisa mentioned, it's a school that has a specialist autism base, where some of the children are always in the autism base, like very much separated out, hard entry, that kind of thing, on break times from the rest of them. But some of them spend quite a lot of time, or a little bit of time, with, as they called it, mainstream. They always pointed upstairs, mainstream up there. And so I've done some of the activities together with a research assistant, Effie, in a school in part of London, and then since lockdown, things have got really interesting. I've really been trying to make the most of the opportunities, right, that having to do things remotely can give us, in ways that I think will translate to different ways of doing things once the pandemic is over, whenever that will be. So, for instance, having already done some things, linking up with a local theatre for the UK-wide Being Human Festival in the past, when that festival went online only for 2020, I proposed an event as part of their autism, as part of their Being Human Cafe series. Right, I proposed Hercules Cafe, right? So that was accepted. That took place last October 2020, and anybody from the world could join in, which is like really interesting. And I did have people joining in from all over the place, including South Africa, Belgium, Poland, and the United States, and even despite time zone differences, Australia as well, which was super. And it was pitched at children, specifically autistic children. But I stressed that anybody could take part. So things seem to be working via Zoom as well. And I think this can give us an opportunity to do what I said at the beginning, and what Lisa has already mentioned. Has just mentioned. Maybe really thinking about how the various activities we're doing translate into other countries and how things are done there. Because I mean, everything Lisa's saying, I could so work in the school I've been to, for example. And then next month, again, to get right. So when Effie and I went into the school in our part of London, right, we were able to do it, not least because Effie was based in the UK at the time. She's now based back in Greece. But what we're going to do next month is link up again and go into a school. The first school we went into was a primary school. We're going to go into a secondary school next month to work with the children there at their autism unit, and we're going to be doing it via Zoom. That's what the school wants. So that's going to be a really interesting opportunity to very much think about how these activities work when done remotely. And I'm currently finalising the lessons and finalising them, not least for the book that I'm writing that collects them together and introduces them. And so what I'm now aiming to do is to include a session on how these might work as online activities. Right, and then we could like really harness the opportunities of connecting with people all over the place. And I've had offers of people to translate them into other languages as well. So there's so much, there's so much potential. So one of the things that I felt really inspired by when I read a draft of some of the things that Lisa and Isla were doing. It really enabled me to think about how, rather than trying to do everything at once, right, for the activities, let people immerse themselves in what myth is, because autistic people often love fantasy, they love things like westerns, video games, they love immersing themselves in different spaces, right? And classical myth can be one of those spaces. So I was trying to immerse people in that. I was trying to get people to think about the potential of colour, emotion, thinking about the future, learning about myth, learning all those sorts of things. I was trying to do everything at once, right? And there is scope for that, but I think it was all a bit too mad. But it needed to be at first. And then it was reading how what Lisa and Isla was doing that was so brilliantly wide-ranging, but so very focused. I loved that interplay, and that then enabled me to see clearly what I needed to do. I'm not going to, so I forgot I wasn't sharing screen because I can see it all here. I'm just going to share screen just briefly again. So this is where we got to before, where I was showing some of the colouring in that people have done. I'm very happy to give a bit of context and say who the people were who coloured in and why they did it and why they, if people want it. But what I wanted what I will show briefly, if it will let me, good, yeah. Okay, so what I've done, very much inspired by Lisa and Isla's work, and also by the feedback I got from the primary school and from other people I've worked with, and also people at the Human event last year. I've divided things very much into clear-cut lessons. There are 10 lessons in total. They're all very much linked with aspects of this particular episode that I've mentioned earlier. What happens is that each lesson has 4 steps. Okay, to begin with, I get some now. I do it when I do things with people, but hopefully people, teachers and others will be able to use the lessons without me. So I start off with this. This is very much something I took inspiration from one of the teachers I was working with at the school in London. She started off by taking things out of her bucket that were going to be relevant to the lesson that she was going to be teaching. And the kids got so excited, they so wanted to know what was going to be in the bucket. So I now have, it's actually a linen basket I bought from a local supermarket, but I called it my amphora, right? I called it the amphora because that's classical, and there is an amphora in the scene, right? So it's all very relevant. So I outlined what people could put in the amphora, which could include, amongst other things, here's a printout of one of Steve Simon's drawings, for example. It could be other relevant objects as well. It could even be things like swords, that kind of thing. For victory, thinking what would Lisa said, little cuts, that kind of thing. So there's all sorts of possibilities, and I make very clear what should be in the what should be or what could be in the amphora. It's all very much about being adaptable as well. So step 1, what's in the amphora. Step 2, talk about something relevant to the particular aspect of the lesson. Oh, and the lessons can also be done in any order, right? That's another thing that's one thing I didn't do previously. So it means that if teachers just want to do one, right, very much linked with a particular issue such as emotions, present into future, entering new spaces, they can do that. They can treat it in a very sort of social stories kind of way if they want to. And social stories, as developed by Carol Gray, have been so instrumental in autistic children's education and learning and support, that kind of thing. All the lessons can be done as an overall program, and that's something I've very much tried to stress in the book. And so one of the challenges for me has been to present things that could all link up, or can be done just very much like one at a time, etc., or can be done in any order. So always amplify and talk about whatever the particular issue is. Then people get to have their turn, right, which could be colouring in, etc. I can say more about that if people want. And then you do something more complex, right? You talk about, what Hercules might have been feeling, for example, and how that might relate to a particular experience that people in the class might once have had. And so what I've put here is just it's the introduction to one of the lessons, number 6 of 10, and it's focusing on one particular stage in the story, what pleasure is maybe saying to Hercules. So it's got a classical dimension, but it's also linking with a particular topic that's very relevant to what it is to be autistic, namely enjoying things, right? Having sort of special interests, for instance. And each time I give a brief introduction. This is still very much in draft form, so if there are any typos, I apologise. If anyone's got any suggestions, I would very much like to hear them. And I always say what the, as my daughter said, the success criteria are for each lesson. And each one's divided in the same way, right? Each one talks about how students will have the opportunity to know about something, to explore something in particular, and then to talk about certain things. So it's very much, about Hercules and classical myth, but it's very much also using Hercules and myth as a vehicle for engaging with what it is to be autistic, both experiencing things that can be classed as difficulties because society disables autistic people, but also fitting with what Lisa said, it's to give the children an opportunity to be autistic and enjoy experiencing the world as autistic people. And look, I've just got one very last slide, which is just this, because you can't end a PowerPoint presentation. There's links and things. So that's how I'm contactable. That's a link to the blog I mentioned, the one I started in 2009 and have kept going ever since. Here's a link to our ACCLAIM website that was launched just last month. Sorry, my sense of time has gone a bit weird thanks to the pandemic, but yeah, we launched it to coincide with Autism Awareness Week for 2021, and there's a link to the wider Our Mythical Childhood website. So that's everything I was going to say. I'm just going to, if I can remember how to stop sharing. Yeah, that's everything I was going to say. I don't know if there's anything more you want to say, Lisa.
No, I think we've sort of covered it, and I think we've gone way over the time that we're asked for. So I think we will leave it there. And maybe I'll also add my email address and contact details so that people can get in contact if they're interested in our particular part of the program. But thank you again very much for inviting us. It's a pleasure, and looking forward to actually being at the conference, even if it's only virtually.
Bye.